White Sox fans, welcome into Sunday Funday with Sox On Tap, presented by On Tap Sportsnet. It's Johnny Nani here alongside Tony Marchese and NWI Steve. Boys, I'm not doing too well. How are you guys doing?
Drink them if you got them.
Here's where I'm at, boys. In August of 2008, Slipknot released an album that I think has a title very fitting for where we are at right now. The title of that album was All Hope Is Gone. And so I know it's not a Slipknot t-shirt, but I wore a band shirt that I think is very fitting for tonight because it feels like we are in the midst of a fucking death march right now.
We absolutely are. White Sox get swept in a weekend series against the Rays, some soul-crushing losses in games 1 and 2, and then a peter out 4-1 loss in game 3. Never really looked in it. That's where we're at right now. It's the state of the team. They haven't won back-to-back games. They haven't won a series, and things are looking so I wish this Sunday Funday, but it's day.
Sox are doing just about as well as Johnny's internet connection right now, Steve. It's not a Sunday Funday, guys. It's not. I know that it says so in the title, but how did we get to this point? How did we get to this point this quickly in the season?
In the business, we call this a false advertisement, Anthony.
Happy Sunday, gentlemen, from Matthew Lucas. Happy Sunday. He dropped the Funday there. Thanks for tuning in, Matthew. But you're right, Steve. That would be a false advertisement in the business. This is a disaster of epic proportions. At least that's what my eyes are telling me. I don't know about you guys.
Right. And the thing is, I wrote up our notes kind of condescendingly, and I said, brutal weekend, brutal season, no positives. You could go and dive in and talk about some Eloy getting back on track and all of that. But my biggest kind of takeaway from where we're at this current point is any good they do in the future can't even be celebrated appropriately without a miracle run. That's where we're at. Just over 3 weeks into the season. And that makes me feel awful.
I absolutely agree with the point you just made there, Johnny, about any sort of positives they make, because I said this to Steve the other day. They're going to go on a run at some point, rattle off 4 out of 5 somewhere, maybe, hopefully. Although at the point where we're at right now, it feels like that's even like so far of a stretch of the imagination that you have to do mental aerobics and gymnastics to even get to that point, to think that they can put together some sort of run. But when they do that, it's going to feel so fucking hollow because of where we're at right now. This team failed to set the tone for the 2023 season. Absolute failure to launch.
If you go and look at the Sox On Tap Twitter account closely, you'll see a certain term that was removed yesterday. Set the tone is no more. The tone is tarnished.
It's truly a very sad state of affairs, and I hate to say this, and it's funny, Nathan, you mentioned that here. I'm honestly not mad as hell. We've reached the point where I'm fucking numb. That's kind of where
you made it there last year, though, Steve.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You sort of predicted this. You're on track for this team to do well worse than your season predictions,
which makes me absolutely fucking miserable. That's what's so disheartening about all this, is literally the worst case scenario that I wrote about before the season. It's all fucking happening, and it's only taken 3 weeks to get to this point. To be in a spot where you can't even make it out of the month of April with hope is truly unbelievable, because guess what? You go to Toronto now, where they haven't played well for years. That could be really fucking ugly. And then you come home to Tampa, and I was talking about this on Twitter.com earlier today because I kept seeing people showing pictures of the standings, saying, as bad as things are, they're only 4 games back. Stop looking at the number as far as in the games back out. It's 5 right now. But at the end of the day here, on May 1st, this team has a very real probability of being 12 to 13 games below 500 and like 10 games out of first, because Minnesota and Cleveland's schedules hit a soft pocket now over the next 10 days here. This is really bad. And
So
I don't even know where we go.
I'm just piling on to that, Steve. The Twins and Guardians kind of tripped over themselves, and the White Sox were not able to take advantage of it at all. So that's one. And then two, I put out a tweet a little bit before the show that I don't foresee them winning a game for the rest of April with where we're at right now. 3 at Toronto, come back home, got 4 against Tampa. Feel like just getting swept straight through that.
And it's just so disheartening to even be thinking about that. You know, I was interacting with some people on Twitter.com earlier this morning and you know, talking about how, you know, they were 7 you know, they only have to win 8 games in a row to get back to 500. When was the last time they did that? You have to go all the way back to 2010 when they had an 11-game winning streak in the middle of that 38-12 run that they had in June and July of that year. It's been that long since they've put together a winning streak of at least 8 games. That's not how you would say encouraging.
And the sad part there, Steve, is even if they did that right now and broke that sort of, what is it now, a 13-year streak of not being able to put something like that together, I still think that Johnny's words ring true. They've already dug themselves the hole. They need to do that. And when have you seen that sort of consistency with this lineup of this core that we've had here, you know, that was put together, you know, 6 years ago when we started this rebuild? I don't see it happening. I don't normally subscribe to the NWI Steve, it's over theory. I like to have some sort of hope for baseball. And this is the most down I've been on this franchise in forever. It sucks. It really sucks. I hate every second of this. And I really don't blame people who are already sitting there looking for what they're going to do this summer besides watch White Sox baseball, because it's fucking ugly. It's terrible. There's no silver linings in any of this.
Right. And Tony, to just jump on that really quick. The reason, that's why I titled this episode what I did, the most unfun team in sports. The worst part about it all is they are completely joyless. Besnick and I touched on it a little bit on Thursday's show or Wednesday's show. And there is no sort of emotion. They don't look like they like each other. I know Besnick brought up the point about what Ozzy said in the past. The only cool thing, like he said, was the Jake Berger bite of the, celebration, bite of the burger with Elvis Andrus. That was quite literally the last time that you saw any sort of fun, any semblance of it. I mean, sure, yeah, you won the game on that second one of the doubleheader Tuesday, but man, there's, you go and watch like the Rays, any other team, just you go and watch Quick Pitch at night and go and see sure, they're chopping up highlights on that and trying to show you the best of the best, right? But every other team has something cool that they're doing. The fucking Tigers even got a Detroit Red Wings helmet in their dugout and they're taking slap shots with a hockey stick after. We don't have anything going. And I'm not saying that's what translates to wins, but baseball should be fun. And right now it's absolutely miserable. Because
what boggles my mind, Johnny, is you've got a guy on this roster who runs a Twitter account called Baseball Isn't Boring in Joe Kelly. And that's his whole marketing plan. And yet he plays on the most unfun team in sports. That's boring. It's boring baseball to watch. And here, Matthew Lucas has a great one in here. The irony of this is the front office probably thinks they have a chance and will sell A-level prospects who are performing for a pen arm that flames out at the deadline. We criticize Rick Hahn for having a bunch of lawyers speak. Right now, I feel like I'm dealing with a bunch of politicians just telling you that everything's going to be fine. And it's not. You're literally watching the world burn around you. And man, The comparisons that you can draw to this team and a lot of other things right now are just right there in your face. It's fucking incredible to watch this dumpster fire the way that we are right now. I'm sorry for bringing that into this, but it speaks to me when I see this, when I see the comments come out from Pedro Grifol, Rick Hahn, everybody that's involved in this thing. It is an absolute shit show from top to bottom. And I'm pissed. I'm really mad. And that's why, Steve, I tried to stay positive last year. A lot of people criticized me for that. I'm irate at what I'm watching because it just doesn't make sense. And people still buy into it.
There are 2 points that I want to bring up here. Jonathan, you talk about just how joyless this is. I describe it as hopeless. I twattered this earlier, that there is nothing worse in sports than being an ardent baseball fan of a team with no hope, because it is every day. You sometimes will go 18 to 20 days without an off day. So it's there staring you in the face every single day. I've talked about this for years. Being an ardent baseball fan and living and dying with your team every day is the toughest thing as a sports fan in the world. Being a football fan is the easiest thing in the world. It's 3 hours a day, once a week. If you're a fan of the Houston Texans and they suck, then guess what? You go to somebody's house, you go to a bar, you get a bunch of food, you get all liquored up, and the game is just part of the ambiance. You can't do that with baseball. It's there every day, crushing your soul, kicking you in the fucking nuts. This is the worst fan experience possible right now. And, Tony, what you were saying about people making other plans for the summer. I mean, I was planning to go watch this team in Cincinnati in 2 weeks. I ain't fucking going. I ain't wasting my time with this shit. I was going to go see him in Atlanta against the Barbs in July. I ain't putting myself through that bloodbath. Absolutely not. I mean, this is how bad it is that in 3 weeks, it is just all gone to shit. I can't ever remember a time in my life, am I all a part of 5 different decades following this fucking franchise, that it has disintegrated this quickly. Even in 2018, the first team in close to 50 years to lose 100 games, it didn't ever feel like this, because you knew what they were doing. You knew there was a plan or a rationale behind it. There's nothing there right now. They're literally a rudderless ship with no fucking direction. And that it's basically like the iceberg has already hit the Titanic, and it is a slow sink into the depths of that ocean.
Right now, when you use the all of sports kind of analogy there, I'm going to go, let's center it just to baseball here. The White Sox are by far the most hopeless team in all of baseball right now. One might bring up the Oakland A's, and you have the announcement that they're going to move to Vegas. And while I'm sure fans in the Bay out there that's probably pretty crushing. Don't get me wrong. You get your team taken away. That hurts. However, that is something then to look forward to from a franchise. If you're still going to continue to be a fan of it, or get new fans in Las Vegas, there is at least some excitement, some hope on the way. They've got a prospect throwing 103, whatever. The White Sox were expected to, compete, right? The Kansas City Royals right now, they're, sure, they're down in the shitter too, but they can go and look at Bobby Witt Jr. They can go and look at a few other guys, Brady Singer, guys on their roster, and, they weren't supposed to compete, right?
Vinny Pasquantino!
Yeah, right. But other than that, even though some other teams may technically have worse records right now, there's no team as hopeless as the White Sox in all of baseball.
And to that point, Johnny, Colson Montgomery hasn't played at all. He's already officially a White Sox. He's got a fucking oblique injury.
Yeah.
He's out. Brian Ramos.
The Moncada special.
Brian Ramos hasn't played either. Noah Schultz, their number 1 pick from a year ago, he's got a forearm issue. So even
that means Tommy John then. That's great.
So even in the minor leagues, what can you look at? Okay, Yoelqui Cespedes has a 20% walk rate in Birmingham. Cool. He's like 25. All right. Like, what are we clinging to here?
Tim Anderson recovering from an injury for the millionth time. Yoan Moncada getting healthy and staying healthy. which has never happened. You talk about hopelessness, and yeah, I mean, I was sitting there yesterday writing up the article, Johnny, about the White Sox signing Stephen Piscotty, and
World
then I
Series
go
back
look.
on confirmed.
Yeah, I look back on the Charlotte Knights roster, and a couple of years ago, we were sitting here, just sort of poring over some of these guys who are going to be coming up. You've got a AAA outfield right now, and it's not just the outfield. If you go look at the infield and some of the pitching prospects in AAA, but specifically the outfield, you've got Billy Hamilton, Jake Marisnick, Victor Reyes, and Stephen Piscotty. There is nothing there that's going to come up and help you. Meanwhile, you log on to Twitter every morning and you sit there and you look at, the lineup come out, and it's Gavin Sheets in right field today. No disrespect to my boy on his birthday, but that was a problem last year for this team. People were very upset that you saw Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets getting these reps in the outfield. And you sort of look at this and you wonder, why is there no depth coming through outside of Yoke Cespedes? Steve just brought him up. But he's not really even an answer. There is no more pipeline. It's gone. Colson Montgomery might be the only name that you can arguably look at within the White Sox farm system and say he ranks anywhere near what some of these other teams have coming through. Johnny, we sit here every day and we watch the Cubs guys cover their team here at On Tap Sportsnet, and there's like 5 or 6 guys that they clamor over within their farm system. And I wonder why we had the pain of going through this entire rebuild when they didn't even really tear their whole entire system down. They were bad for maybe a year or two. And you see them having the fun that we talk about wanting on the south side of Chicago. It's bad. It's bad. When you look at this and take a 10,000-foot view of the entire major leagues, I think you're dead on when you say this is the most hopeless franchise right now in baseball. If you want to go expand it out to other sports, they're probably top 5.
I think the only one in Major League Baseball that you can even argue would be the Colorado Rockies. So maybe there's a Juan Uribe curse going around that maybe our boy Besnick needs to do an investigation into. I know he's dug deep into the long storied rivalry between the Sox and the Colorado Rockies, but there might be more to this.
Wow. In full halftime here. Sox on Tap investigates.
Not even 20 minutes in.
Guys, I know we've kind of talked a lot of kind of general dread here, which is what all White Sox fans are feeling. So we appreciate all of you here in the YouTube comments, Facebook comments, dropping them in here. Make sure you're subscribed on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Click the like button and that little bell so you know when we go live. Jump in here. We're here to share the pain together. So I want to move into a few kind of things that are specific. And I know there's some blame to be tossed around at various levels, right? You go and talk about pitching, not locking in from the beginning, walking too many guys. You go and talk about Pedro Grifol deciding to, intentionally walk a switch hitter to get to the hottest man on the planet, Randy Arozarena. You get to go and talk about all of that. But the two that are, I think, really eating at me the most is the plate approach and then the results of what happened with that. And there's a couple good tweets out there. And one that I just recently saw right before we jumped on was Jay Kuda had the graph of where teams are and how they hit for launch angle and then exit velocity. And the White Sox are in the lower left quadrant of balls on the ground and softly hit. And that's not going to get it done. And then you go and look at the kind of numbers like Shane McClanahan posted and all the whiffs and Codify, and everybody's going nuts over this. And it's the fucking White Sox. They have no clue what they're doing at the plate. It's honestly not even impressive that McClanahan got those numbers because of how bad the White Sox are. That's where I'm at. That's what's really chapping my ass today.
I'll take things that make Steve mad for 400, Alex. I'll let you comment on this, Steve.
That's spot on. Jonathan, I saw, that tweet from Codify yesterday. And, I literally quote tweeted that. I said, he goes, "This is truly unbelievable." I go, when you consider the opponent, it's actually not. Because this team, I've been talking about this for 3 weeks now here. They don't draw walks. They don't hit home runs. When you don't do those things, in the year of our Lord 2023, you don't win baseball games. Offense is very simple in 2023. And I know there's all the talk about the increased number of hits because of the elimination of the shift and things like that. But at the end of the day, literally going back to the dead ball era. So we have over 100 years worth of data at this point. That's not a small sample size. When you out-homer your opponent, you win 75% of the time. I know we already had, I think, 1 or 2 instances this year where the Sox out-homered their opponents and lost, but it holds true 75% of the time. You hit home runs, you win. This team doesn't do it.
This team hits home runs and loses.
Yeah. But
that's a huge problem.
But,
I was
but
going
the
to
other
ask you about this. Ball go far, team go far. When you can't even do that, and I've seen them do it, I think it's been at least 2 or 3 times now this season, Steve, where they've out-homered an opponent and lost. It goes back to sort of that triangle meme, Johnny, that we talked about earlier. You get one and you're going to like. I felt like today you got nothing and you were going to like it. That's what's even scarier. Is there's some days this team completely does completely nothing right on the baseball field. But how do you out-homer your opponent and lose in this many baseball games?
I'll tell you.
Are they going to be an enigma by the
No,
end of the year?
No, I'll tell you how. I'll tell you how it happens, Anthony. Because if you hit 2 solo home runs, or if you hit 3 solo home runs, and your opponent hits a 3-run homer and a 2-run homer, that's how. Because your pitchers are fucking walking the entire ballpark. And you, as a team, refuse to take any walks. Look what happened. Apparently, there was that inning on Friday, because thankfully I didn't see any of that fucking disaster. There was that inning where they had 6 walks, and then they pieced together a rally out of it. It's almost like, holy shit, maybe, just maybe, if somehow organizationally they say, hey, we need to fix this. We need to put these guys in a position to have better plate discipline. Maybe, just maybe, that would change things.
I've got one comment to jump right off on that. Just I had a few conflicting thoughts on this. One, I was hoping that might be a wake-up call, right? You go and see what happens when all these walks. But the way that it came about was the Rays, the reliever they brought in, just couldn't throw a fucking strike. It wasn't us having a really good plate approach or anything like that. He just threw it so wild that we couldn't do it. So now I'm actually upset that happened, because it makes their numbers look just slightly better than as putrid as they should be. And that, I don't know, that's just kind of where my mind went there. And it's like, they don't even deserve that. They don't deserve to be rewarded. They don't deserve to have any little spike or boost just because a pitcher couldn't have it right then, because you got rewarded for nothing. Because
Johnny, I understand your frustration on that, but I wanted to ask you guys this, and I had this sort of in the back of my mind. How do you fix this? I don't expect anybody to have the magic answer here, because we would be employed by the White Sox. Well, maybe a better organization than the White Sox if we did. But I'm sitting there thinking, I'm just telling every single White Sox hitter, you're taking until first pitch strike. And I have not seen them employ this strategy at all. That's the first thing I can think of. When you look at the way that these guys piss away some of these at-bats, I get being selective at the plate. You can see Yasmani Grandal's plate approach is completely different than a lot of the other guys on this roster. And that's one of the reasons that he's celebrated in certain sects of White Sox Twitter, even for what he is. But at what point does Pedro Grifol or the White Sox coaching staff tell guys like Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, even Andrew Vaughn to an extent, you are taking until you have 1 strike on you, just to see more than 3 to 4 pitches in the at-bat. Do the White Sox really face every pitcher when he's just on, outside of the one instance we saw, Johnny? Or is it the fact that the scouting report against these guys is you don't have to throw them a strike? You're listening to the national broadcast yesterday. I forget who Benetti was paired with, but there was a
Tom Verducci.
It was Tom Verducci. He said something that was very striking to me, and that's kind of in the DNA of the White Sox. You don't have to throw them a strike. When you've got an announcer on a national broadcast talking about what the book is on the scouting report for these guys, number one, that's fucking embarrassing on national television to just hear like, oh, those are my guys. Yeah, they're going to swing at every. Where do you slow this down as an organization and say, that was an embarrassing moment? I don't think enough people have talked about that. I think we have here. I think a bunch of the other Sox podcasts and blogs have talked about it. But if we're all able to identify this as a problem, how has the organization not identified this as a problem?
It's very simple. It all comes back to an infrastructure issue because the very person at the top doesn't believe in investing in the infrastructure at the lower levels because he doesn't see it. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, James Fegan at The Athletic wrote the article about how they were finally just giving guys in Winston-Salem and Birmingham heat maps on the opposing pitcher. Things that were literally being done by other organizations 4 and 5 years ago. They literally just got the pitching machines that will mimic the break of sliders and curveballs. They just got these things. They are so far behind the 8 ball. It is truly disgusting. I joked about this years ago when I read the MVP machine back in 2018. I literally said other organizations are already moving past what the information that's in this book. The White Sox are just getting caught up on Moneyball from 20 years ago. That's how antiquated and how out of step this organizational infrastructure is. And until that changes, nothing else matters. And none of this will matter because that's where this all starts. And you have an owner that literally thinks it's the same game as it was 40 years ago when he bought the team. Literally thinks that it's played the exact same way and that nothing has changed other than you have a couple of rogue owners spending a lot of money on superstars. It's not even the same game it was 10 years ago, and they are so far behind the rest of the league. That's why we are where we are.
Sad but true. Nailed it there, Steve. It's a good explanation for it to answer these questions. I know you can go and pile on. I like some of the comments that we got in here. Just traded for good players and hope they'd pan out naturally. Because I've always been a big proponent of Chris Getz needs to go yesterday. I think Gordon laid out the perfect case for it when he was talking about what the Rays do and how they just are able to churn out players there. I think that made the case against it there. So yeah, that's one there. Let's see, we got drafts during the rebuild worse than the last 2 during the contention window. Yeah, you can go make that. I mean, Nick Madrigal was a draft pick. What do you take him for? That's brutal. Zero due diligence and an inability to truthfully self-reflect. That might be the biggest one here. Because like you said, just going to stay the same as long as someone at the top is still at the top.
As they say, what is the definition of insanity? That's it.
Right.
There's so many things you can come back with to that, Steve, but all of them revolve around the White Sox. So pick your poison.
It's bad. Okay.
I felt like that was a moment of silence around how we did the
moment of silence for the 2023 White Sox already here.
We did the laughing because we're laughing because we don't want to cry. And I feel like now we're at like moments of silence for the 2023 Chicago White Sox. They're not, it's April, guys. And that sounds so bad to say.
5 months left of this, baby.
Yeah. We're going to have to come up with some content for September because this could get really fucking interesting by that point in time. Nathan Hubbard has
September.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna still be doing the show.
I'm saying we might need to act quicker than September at the rate this thing is going.
Well, I'm just wondering what kind of content we're going to be trying to provide on the September, mid-September Sunday Funday show, Steve. It's going to get really interesting. I'm already tossing beers behind me as we go here. Bring back Chicken Willie and the Budweisers. That's what we need. Everything went to shit after the Miller deal, but I'm not going to go too far into that. I did want to talk to you guys about the Hawk Harrelson interview on Foul Territory TV. I don't know if either of you guys got the chance to watch that. Steve, I think you did, but there was some really interesting things said about this organization out of the mouth of Hawk Harrelson, and some people give him credence, others won't. But he was around this org for a lot longer than most people were. And he had some damning words about Brooks Boyer and some of the marketing and things that took place when he got retired. I think that was the big sticking point from a lot of people. But I dug into some of the not a family type things that took place within that interview and how the clubhouse was. And Johnny, I know you and I just went through this also with our Blackhawks in a change of a broadcast booth and a bunch of guys that had been around an organization for a long time that wanted to change their identity. What's really interesting to me is they tried to, the White Sox from a marketing standpoint, tried to change their identity as a ball club. They went with the whole change the game slogan. You saw a bunch of, different things that were out there. They took away Steve's dollar hot dogs. And the marketing has been there. It's been successful from a marketing standpoint, but from an on-the-field product standpoint, you haven't seen the results to back any of that up. A lot of people are going to call for Rick Hahn's job. I think I already see that right now, but I don't think you really change this identity until you get down to the core of it. And I'm going to sit here right now and say, I don't think Brooks Boyer should be in charge of the marketing of the Chicago White Sox anymore. As you said, Steve, false advertisements. I think we need to take a long look and really self-evaluate. The self-awareness of this ball club is so far from what it actually should be.
I think that's a very accurate assessment. I mean, you could make the argument that things really started to go downhill once the softball uniform started getting incorporated into this team's routine. Because, I think the first time they wore that was in early June of 2021. Let's look at their record since then. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So from a marketing standpoint, you could definitely make that case right there that, the Southside softball jerseys ultimately ended the contention window. So, there's that.
Johnny's got the South Side flag just rocking right behind him.
As a flag, it's fine. Or even just as a T-shirt, it's fine. But that shouldn't be on a Major League Baseball field as a uniform. No, absolutely not.
No. Steve for GM and head of marketing of the Chicago White Sox.
I mean, I do have a marketing degree from a very prestigious Midwest university, so, I mean, there's that.
Oh, man. You brought up the Hawk thing with the got retired there. I thought that was kind of interesting and kind of echoed the sort of rumblings that were out there about Pat Foley and the way that thing ended with the Blackhawks, even though it was publicly, touted as a mutual part ways, retire sort of thing. I just want to say that's sad because I love Hawk. So hate to hear that, but I'm also not shocked given the kind of slop that we've all just trudged through here.
Well, Johnny, I just want to ask you, are you excited to see Jason Benetti continue to eat and chew into a microphone on your broadcast for the next 4 months at least?
Yeah, totally.
And then do a national broadcast where he enjoys watching Randy Rosarina just murder
Dude, that's the one thing I wanted to bring up. And it's not, I understand that these guys have to, they still have to acknowledge, what's going on there, but you can brand it in a certain way, correct? What Jason Benetti does is he brands everything seemingly as a national baseball call, even when it's the local broadcast on NBC Sports Chicago. And some people love it and they get their rocks off to it. But I'm sorry, I don't care if someone made a great diving play for the Rays. I'd rather hear Hawks' frustration after that than highlighting how great so and so, how great Brandon Lau is, how great fucking Randy Rosarina is. I don't want to hear that. And it really, when you're sitting through another tragic White Sox loss, which we've done a million times already this season, it really, I don't know, it really gets at me. That's one thing that I really do miss from the Hawk. I'd rather hear a half inning of Hawk silence sometimes than when Benetti's rambling about something like that. But that's, I guess, Sunday Funday, what grinds your gears section for Johnny here.
Yeah, I guess, our guy, I think it was Pat Comiskey, said something. Poor Len Casper wanted to come here to call World Series on the radio. I saw that the other day, and I just thought to myself, I'm like, oof. Yeah, major oof. But Steve, I'm curious how you feel on this. Because it's going to be a different feeling as we have to go through White Sox futility with Jason Benetti and Steve Stone in the booth. I know how our guy Buzz feels about Stone, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes down. But, at least Gordon Beckham sort of gives you something in that role. But if this continues to get bad, like how bad can it get with the national style call of Jason Benetti in a White Sox, not rebuild, not contention window, not when they have hope, but how bad can this broadcast get? Not that it's bad on a surface level, because I think when the White Sox are winning, Benetti does a fine job. But as we get into the dark days, the days that you predicted in your season prediction, how bad can this get? And how are you going to feel listening to this as it rolls on?
I'm going to feel fucking miserable. I mean, I don't know how else to put this. I'm already miserable. I know you think that I take joy in this, and I know you think that I take joy in seeing my prediction article come to fruition, but trust me, that's not the case. Anybody that has known me for any extended period of time, you ask anybody in my family or anything, the performance of this team has more of an impact on my day-to-day mood than it should. And knowing what is likely about to happen, it's fucking nauseating. And the idea of having to listen to conversation about balloon animals in the stands or some other goofy hijinks going on amongst, the 1,400 people that are going to be showing up to games here in short order.
3 of them right here.
I mean, it's going to be just truly miserable. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this has the potential to be the darkest period of my fandom. And I'm approaching, and I'm, almost 10 years older than both of you. I know, Jonathan, I've got over a decade on you, but this has really got the potential to be uglier than anything I've ever experienced.
Right. And the thing that gets me about this is that I know people hate the long season or the it's early comments, right? And I'm with you, because that doesn't excuse terrible play early on. These games are still just as important as a game in mid-August or September, what have you. But when you go and look at it in a different mindset, now let's take off the competitive, side of it and look at it from a fan standpoint. And it is a long season, and it is still early in that regard, because you're going to have to do this shit all damn summer, and it's going to be miserable. It's like the whatever this clip from Goodfellas. It's going to be a good summer. It's going to be a dog shit summer. Get ready. That's where I'm at.
It's kind of to the point where, when we were at the ballpark last week, Jonathan, it was like, that Sunday game, they go up 3-0 in the first inning, and then they don't score again after that. And then, the first game of that doubleheader, they fall behind 5-0. They scratch back and claw and then get 4 runs back. So it's like they jump out early, and you're thinking to yourself, they're not going to hold this. Or they fall down 5 runs early in the first innings. They're like, well, this thing is done. It's just the overall mood and everything surrounding this team right now is so bad. And for it to be happening so early in the calendar of a baseball season, I mean, it's going to lend itself to just some really, really dark, negative times at the ballpark. And that sucks. That completely sucks because even during those years, 2017 through 2019, they would
You
lose
had
games.
hope.
You had hope. You had hope. And it was like, but you knew what you were watching. You knew they weren't going out there and actively trying to win. And that's a whole separate discussion about whether that was the right thing to do or not. That we're not here to relitigate that. But you knew objectively what was happening in front of you. Right now, you don't know, because the fact of the matter is you can look at this thing and say they need to tear it down because this core group isn't it. They can't piece together performance and health at the same time. They haven't been able to do it. They haven't played quality, consistent baseball for almost 2 years now. So you can look at that and say they need to tear this thing down. They need to trade Cease. They need to trade Tim Anderson and any of the other guys that are on expiring deals. But you can't trust the people in charge to do it and do it correctly.
Right.
And so now you're in this holding pattern where you just don't know what is going to happen. But the one thing you do know is that as bad as it is right now, it can absolutely get worse.
And it will. It will. And that's like the really sad part for me too, because I'll be honest, I'm done with rebuilds. I would honestly rather see them, if there was a way to just go out and buy a whole new team, right? Or at least, the main parts of it. That would be my route, because I don't want to go and sit through and fucking watch, years of grainy highlights, prospects from fucking, low A into, Birmingham's. Their camera's shit too, by the way. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to cycle through that. And like you said, Steve, the biggest part of that is the people making the decisions at the top there. That's the scariest part, because they're not qualified to do so. You've seen the results of Rebuild 1, right? Well, whatever we're going to call it. Where are we at? I know in Bulls land, we're in like Rebuild 3.0.
Rebuild 2 here, right?
I contend this is Rebuild 2.
Rebuild 2. Okay. So you've seen the results though, right? So honestly, everyone talks about tearing it down, but I feel like that they don't understand or at least they, in the moment, they say, oh, that's the only way that you can right this thing. Well, is it even going to get righted then? I don't know. I doubt it. So like you said, you're in that kind of limbo. That's the best way I put it.
Here's the sad part too, and you hit on something, Johnny. I'm done with rebuilds myself. Sports are getting to a point where, at least from what I've looked at, they're trying to make it harder to rebuild. You've seen the implementation of draft lotteries. You've seen talk about how commissioners don't like the rebuilding stuff. And we're only going to get more and more in an environment within professional sports where rebuilds are going to be penalized. The White Sox were sort of that last rebuild that took place. There was a couple other teams that were able to execute on it, I think, a little bit better. Look at the Baltimore Orioles as one of those organizations. And it'll be interesting to see how Major League Baseball sort of combats it with a little bit more enforcement than they had before. But when I look at the White Sox, it was a rebuild with a marketing plan behind it. I said this to Buzz on Friday, and I hate to double down on this, but it's almost like we were Bernie Madoff into believing that this thing was going to have far more returns than it ever did. And you wonder why there's so much angst amongst this fan base. It's because you had people out there believing that this whole entire decade was going to be White Sox dominance. And I really can't think of anything in human history outside of Bernie Madoff scamming a ton of people out of a fuck ton of money than what we're witnessing right here. It sucks as a baseball fan. Steve talked about it earlier. As a baseball fan, you live and die with this every day. It's not just show up, watch your football team play on Sunday, and come back and you can go through a whole work week and then think about your football team again. This is day in, day out. We do these post-game shows. We write about this team. We cover this. We're diehard White Sox fans. It is sad that we're sitting here right now talking about guys that are going to have to be traded in a potential rebuild 3, and there's been absolutely no accountability. There's no oversight. There's no repercussion for this. And so when you think about how does this get better, I want to ask you guys, how does this get better? And the answer comes back to Jerry sells the team or dies. Like those are
that's it. That is it.
I don't feel like that is a position that you want to be in as a fan because Jerry cares about his team. I don't think that's up for argument.
I will actually argue that.
How could you argue that? I think somebody who paid
millions
of dollars for something cares about it.
I will argue that very simply. If he really cared as much as Scott Merkin and some of the guys that are around this team every day claim that he cares, that nobody wants to win more than him.
I would argue he's just bad at being an owner.
No. If he really cared, Ken Williams, Rick Hahn, and everybody would have been gone after 2016. You could even make the case that they would have been gone after 2011. Okay?
And that's a fair argument, Steve.
So you can't tell me that he really, truly cares about this thing when he just keeps trotting out the same group. I mean, let's think about this. Ken Williams has been the top decision maker in the White Sox organization, whether it's as the general manager or executive vice president, for 23 years now. 23 years. They have 5 playoff appearances, one of which is a Mickey Mouse playoff appearance. Okay? So 4 playoff appearances that are real. He's Bill Wirtz 2.0. Sox Insane makes the great point.
I don't know. I want to go to Johnny on this because I feel like one was worse than the other.
There's layers because you had certain, the whole TV thing. I mean, that alone, that's pretty ridiculous. Then obviously you saw the Blackhawks being voted the worst franchise in all of sports back in, was that Sports Illustrated before the, Taves Kane era. 07, 08? Yeah, around there. But I mean, I think it's a good point. I mean, I think you put them on the same plane. That's where I'd be.
No, that's absolutely fair. I think, Steve, my argument comes from his pride is too high to sell the team at this point in time.
Though I
would argue that he cares. I don't think he cares about it the same way that anybody sitting on this show does.
He cares about it in the sense that he can make $20 to $25 million in profit every year like clockwork because he is a very well-structured and strong businessman with contracts. So he's very good at that. So he cares about it as far as his return on investment and the ROI that he gets for the board of directors. He cares about that.
But I won't sit here and talk actual value and ROI because I haven't seen their books. So I won't throw out that he makes ROI on something.
I find it hard to believe that he would own this team for 40 years if they weren't making money.
Then that's a fair assessment, but I would base that more into opinion and speculation versus actual factual knowledge. I've never seen the White Sox books. I don't know if anybody here seen the White Sox books, anybody listening to the show seen the White Sox books, he very well could take losses in some years. I'm not going to go into saying on this show whether or not he makes a profit or not, just because he very well could. It could be higher than what you're saying, Steve. On that note, though, you talk about keeping it in the family. I worry about the long term of this franchise, and I think he's too proud to actually get rid of the team and put us in a position where we're talking about something different than this on our Sunday at 5:00.
I wonder what the next step is, because Michael's got the Bulls, right?
That's well,
he does.
There's all that speculation, and it's been going around for years now that he has told Michael, who has actually been buying out some of the minority owners of this team. And there's all the speculation that he has told Michael to keep the Bulls and sell the Sox because the Bulls are a better business. And
ridiculous if the Bulls still sell out, by the way, like every game.
Oh,
that's wild to me.
Yeah, no. And, so you hear that.
When Buzz shows up to more Bulls games than White Sox games, you know that they're a better business.
Exactly. I mean, so, and, you've heard some names about people that would be potential new owners for this team, and some of those names are out there in the open if you just do a little tiny bit of digging. But until that day happens, we don't know. And it's just brutal. And I've said this, and I will stand by this position. The day Jerry Reinsdorf's reign of terror ends will be the second happiest day of my life.
I think that's a good way to put a bow on this discussion for right now. We're approaching the hour mark here, so I want to look ahead because there is still, as much as we kind of went more grand vision on this sort of thing. I think that was necessary therapy session for White Sox fans, but there's still baseball games coming up here. So let's look at series at Toronto.
Are they baseball games or automatic wins for the opponent?
Right. Monday, Lance Lynn, Chris Bassett. Tuesday, Mike Clevenger versus Jose Barrios. And Wednesday finale, Michael Kopech versus Yusei Kikuchi. Obviously, starting off there at the top, Lynn, I think this is a big prove it game. It's weird to say that right now, but he's got to prove that he can adjust, right? I think that's kind of where I'm at here.
I'm at the point where I need Steve to write an article looking at all of Lance Lynn's StatCast data and fix him before he takes the mound.
I'm going to tell you this much. I looked at some StatCast pages and some of the guys' pages on Baseball Savant earlier this morning, and I was really close to throwing up my breakfast. People very, very bad.
People have been singling out a few certain players on this. Steve and I had this discussion. They've really been hammering Mike Clevenger. They've really been hammering Lance Lynn over some of the stuff, really hammering Luis Robert over, plate approach and stuff like that. And I get it. That's all fair. All fair analysis. Go and show me a White Sox players page that looks good, though. You can't. That's
Jake Berger.
Just know that when you go and look at one of those. All right. That was right. We were also kind of like in the middle of that before.
You can't argue with me, guys. Gavin Sheets, the highest hit pitch for a home run, that looked good in the StatCast era. Other than that, Steve's right. Jake Berger.
Right.
I don't. Even Dylan Cease has regressed.
Maybe Jimmy Lambert. I haven't actually gone and looked at Lambeau's page. Maybe that's one of them right there.
Yeah, home run. When they give that up,
yeah,
he's got a couple of homers in the books that might eat at that a little bit. Oh, never mind. That was walk-off single that a Rosarina hit off him, so not as bad. But yeah, that's the point there. But getting to the series, like I said, Lance Lynn and Chris Bassett. Feel like I go back to my prediction. I'll kind of hold that. I think they don't win a game throughout the rest of April. But as I'm looking at these here, the game that they should win is Wednesday, and it's weird now. Before we talked about got to take 2 or 3. Now we're talking about can we steal 1? At least that's where my head's at. I don't know about you guys. And I'm looking at Wednesday. You say Kikuchi, lefty, right? Should be able to hammer him, but at the same time, Michael Kopech also, susceptible to some damage against. So
I would argue that if they were going to steal 1, I actually think that they would be more likely to steal Tuesday with Jose Barrios on the mound, as bad as he has been for the Minnesota, or excuse me, for the Toronto Blue Jays there. And, the Sox have hammered him a couple of times in recent years. But the thing that is just very concerning is this team has played really bad north of the border for the last decade. Everybody wants to talk about Tampa and some of these other places being a house of horrors. They actually talked about this on the broadcast. Coming into this weekend, the Sox had been 8-5 in their last 13 games in Tampa. So while on the surface it feels like they haven't played that well, they actually have. Because I remember going down there in 2019 and seeing the Sox win 2 out of 3 on a team that lost 90 games, taking 2 out of 3, and they were a couple pitches away from getting a sweep against that team that season. So, but north of the border, it's been a totally different story. They have just gone out there and they have been getting their brains beat in for close to a decade now. So that's where this thing, as painful as this week and this last series has been, these next 3 days could be even uglier. I hate to say that.
I'm not even going to add anything to that. I sort of agree with you guys. You have to win until I can start to predict that you're going to win anything. So at this point, I'm sort of sitting there going, all right, prove it. Show me that you're showing up at the ballpark ready to kick some ass, because everything feels like a lie to me.
Well, first 7-10 start not until what, May 12th. So I'm gonna have to wait a few more weeks on that ass kicking, Tony. We'll be receiving until then.
Is that this year's waiting for the division to show up?
Yes. Just mark it down. Yes.
The jokes write themselves sometimes.
Yeah, they do write themselves. I think everything's been pretty negative here, and understandably so. But we can take a win here at Sox on Tap, guys. I'm going to take a win because Besnick and I ran the show at the end of the Phillies series, right? Looking, recapping that, looking ahead to the weekend. And I titled it Final in like the SpongeBob mocking, sort of print. And I just did that because I'm so tired of seeing when you see Final, period, that's another fucking graphic of a score that's a loss. So they did it again after we got walked off Friday. They did it again, and I was right on it from Sox on Tap, responded with the actual SpongeBob mocking meme in Final in the, uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, lowercase. And then the next 2 days, there's still been losses, obviously, on the field, but they have not tweeted Final.
I noticed this, Johnny, and I was actually going to send you a text message about it and ask you if you've gotten ahead of the Twitter admin over there, because I've noticed this development. So kudos to you for getting across on this, because now that I know that you noticed this as well, they're going to have to, come up with something better than Final. So Sox on Tap victory, you can take your W. I'll hand it to you.
Yeah. We got to celebrate what we can here. So I'm taking that as a win.
You're ahead of the curve, Jonathan.
It's got to be such a rough job. Yeah, and I don't mean to slight the Twitter admin over there at all, but it's funny. It's funny.
You
could win ball games, and it would be much easier for your Twitter admin.
So, obviously, the social media admin is not playing the baseball games or managing the baseball games, right? But like, we're kind of bookending the show with this point. Any good that they do in the future can't be celebrated without a miracle run. So any home run that they hit, and they got to share the video of it or whatever, will still continue to get absolutely dragged in the replies until they go on some sort of miracle run, which isn't going to happen. So I feel bad. I feel bad for the admin, but at the same time, you needed to vary up the caption. So Sox on Tap wins this round.
The fact that this team is getting absolutely dragged by Pittsburgh Pirates fans in their mentions after every single loss is just so sad to me. It's very sad to see, because we could be Pittsburgh Pirates fans running Pittsburgh Pirates on Tap right now, doing post-game shows and doing everything that we do for
Actually
this.
talking about wins, though. 'Cause they're off to a
That's the
fucking
difference.
ridiculous
Actually
start.
talking about wins. And we could be dragging other fan bases, but we've got nothing to be proud about here. Outside of maybe our performance, and that's why we'll take our W. Johnny got the social media admin to stop saying final. That's what we accomplished this week in the White Sox fan base.
It got repetitive as hell, and obviously it's happening every day. So that's where it stands, man. This show, I hope it was some sort of therapy session for, even if it was just for one person out there listening. We appreciate all of you tuning in, dropping your comments in here. Go ahead, On Tap Sports YouTube, subscribe, like there, click the little bell. When we go live, we'll be live after all the Toronto series in Thursday, and then off Friday, Saturday. Some of us will be experiencing the pain in person on Saturday. So I would say I'm looking forward to the week ahead. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys, but not watching the baseball games. That's where I'll leave it. That's my final thought.
Pain. I don't know what else to say. Pain.
I don't have much else. I'm just going to kill this beer and throw it over my shoulder.
There you go. Yeah. One of the many MVPs in the comments here, Matthew Lucas, says, thanks. Have a great, fuck yeah. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a great night. Hope you do too, man. Despite it all, go Sox. That's what we're here for.
Anthony, were you at least able to land that thing on the pool table?
White Sox forever.
I got close, but White Sox forever.
White Sox for life.